don't have a university degree, and yet I ended up working for the president of the country.
Today I'm talking to Yvonne Johnston with a T, who's a consciousness coach.
Who are you without the job title, without the money you earn, without the car you drive, without your partner, without the house you own? Who are you? The human being. A lot of people live very mediocre lives, passive passengers in their lives and in their careers. Quit being passive. What life do you want? People often outsource their careers, wait for their boss to promote them. You are the manager of your career. If you want something, go get it. The first time you do anything is the most scary. That's the worst it's ever going to be. I went to do a retreat many years ago. What I'd written on my first day, my insight on the first day, was that my level of negative self-talk was unacceptable. That day, I made the decision to stop speaking to myself negatively. You will never ask me, how are you, Yvonne? And I'll say, I'm fine. Never. I'm never fine. I'm always fantastic. That's the power of this process, is that you become totally 100% responsible for your thoughts, your words, your actions, your life, your future, everything.
Welcome to the Corner Office, where we bring you the latest news from the world of commercial real estate, the greatest voices in the industry, and the corporate chats you've been missing. Let's get to it.
Today I'm talking to Yvonne Johnston with a T, who's a consciousness coach. She's a master consciousness coach. We've worked with her for a number of years now. In fact, myself personally and a number of our executive. She is a nation brander. She's a public speaking expert. She's a crisis confidence coach, at least, and works with a lot of people in this idea of bringing themselves to consciousness. She's worked all over the world, lives in Mallorca, does all of her coaching online now, and is just a fundamentally interesting person who has met with all of the world leaders, and she's worked with Mandela himself, and we've had the privilege of working with her for the last year, and today you have the privilege of listening to my conversation with her. Yvonne, what is consciousness coaching?
What is consciousness coaching? It's coaching that teaches people to develop their consciousness. What does that mean? You know, it can be quite a spiritual term, but for me, I try to make it a little bit more practical. It's about becoming really conscious of your thoughts, really conscious of your words, and really conscious of your actions. And why is this important? Well, it's important in life. It obviously creates beautiful relationships. But many, many years ago, I read a book called Conscious Capitalism. And I began to realize that a conscious leader can make more money, has better relationships with their staff, and actually can transform business. And it made a massive impact on me. And one of the case studies in that book was of Ratan Tata. And Ratan Tata, I had the great, enormous pleasure to meet, because when I worked in government, he sat on President Mbeki's investment council. And Ratan Tata is the son, I think, of the person who started Tata Industries. And they've got 300,000 employees around the world. And he is one of the most conscious leaders in the world. So for me, he became such an inspiration that you can run a massive organization on principles of people before profit, putting people first, and really being conscious about and intentional about how you run your business. So I was turned on to this idea many, many years ago, long before I became a consciousness coach.
We've done quite a lot of work with you as in our executive and in our business. And so I think really the reason we thought that we'd chat to you today is there's such a huge war on talent at the moment, really. I mean, you know, across the board, I think in every industry, people are trying to attract the best people. There's an influx of AI, which people are saying is going to take out so many roles and all the rest of it, but it always leads to interpretation, and it always leads to, you know, ultimately the people that are involved in the organization. And so given this war on talent and people transitioning between industries, what I want to try and understand is, historically, you know, whoever it might be, our parents or the boomers, as it were, would stay in these roles and they'd be there for 30 years, 40 years, and they'd kind of go through this whole period of life working for one business. I listened to the CEO of LinkedIn say that he views any career as a tour of duty. So while you're there, you need to put in your best. You need to be part of that team. but it's a tour of duty. As you exit, you go into another part of your career, and always wish those people well. And we've really always had that culture in this business. But what's been fascinating, and I think what I wanted to chat to you about is, and how do you actually build that confidence to transition industries? Because it's not necessarily any easier. Well, maybe it is a bit easier to transition businesses than it was for the boomers perhaps, but it's still a big change. You might be coming from, some of our guys have moved out of farming, school teachers, financial industry, architects, etc., etc. It's quite a significant change to move into this industry. And what I wanted to try and unpack with you was, how does this idea of consciousness in this change really embody whether it's going to be a successful career transition or whether it's going to be a bumpy career transition?
I mean, that's a very complex question, because I think there are many parts of that puzzle. But I think in the end, it's about how you were mothered. I think far too many mothers rescue their children and don't allow them to learn to think. And in the end, what holds any human being back is fear, afraid of the unknown. And so for me, the one skill that really needs to be honed is to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, having a curious mind, having a mind that says, what if positive, not what if negative, and really going into a space of curiosity and finding out what is possible. My favorite word in the English language is possibility. And it's about exploring possibility and having a curious mind to be able to do that. The other thing is that people often outsource their careers. They wait for their boss to promote them. And those people who stayed in a company for 40 years, they kind of outsourced their whole lives to their boss and expected their boss to know when they wanted to be promoted and how much money they wanted to earn. And I've spent the last 20 years saying to people, you are the manager of your career. If you want something, go get it. And I really talk from my own personal experience here, because I don't have a university degree. And yet I ended up working for the president of the country. And I did that because I educated myself endlessly. And I took complete charge of my career from day one. I mean, my first job was a waitress. And when I was a waitress, I went to the boss and said, I want to be the manager. And then I got into advertising, and I wanted to be I was a media buyer. And then the media planner would leave. And before the media planner had reached the lift, I was at the boss's office saying, please give me that job. Can you do that job, Yvonne? No, but I'll learn. Show me where to learn. And I think that a lot of people are passive passengers in their lives and in their careers. And so my invitation always is to quit being passive. Like, what life do you want?
So you're saying almost people go through this life being in the subconscious phase. So they kind of, they drive to work, they have the same breakfast, they get to work, they do the same thing, and then they roll in the next day, and maybe they chat to the same people at work, and that's what it is. And the next thing you know, a couple of years have gone by, and you're doing exactly the same thing.
Exactly. And if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same result. It's as simple as that. So I think that it's really important that the focus, that your whole life becomes more intentional. What do you want as your next step? And you go out of your way to create it. Because a lot of people live very mediocre lives. I think we've been badly educated to think that 80% is a distinction. And if you got 80% for something, you're amazing. And I'm sitting here saying, hell no. If you're scoring 80%, 20% of your life is missing. Like, what is that 20%? What's the magic sauce? What's the miracles that can happen in that space?
We did an interesting exercise together, you and I know you've done it with, a couple of the other guys, is asking all these pretty challenging questions about life. How happy are you? How much would you rate yourself here? What do you think your career is doing? Loads of different questions. I know you have sort of 20, 30 of these questions. Rate yourself on those items, and you get down to rating yourself, go through the list, and then you say, well, where would you like to be in a year's time? Where would you like to be when you finish coaching? And generally you'll improve it quite significantly. So maybe you say, oh, I'm feeling 60% at the moment, and I'd love to be 80%. And to that exact point, so surely you'd love to be 100%. Why don't you go for the 100? You say, well, actually, I would like the 100. So, well, why don't you say 100? And there's so much in there, just realizing that by actually vocalizing and being conscious about saying, I want to be at 100%, then you actually go for the 100%. You know? Fascinating.
A lot of people settle. And I really want to say to people, don't. Like, how many people walk into my coaching space with a 80% relationship? Like, what the hell is the point of that? What's the point of having an 80% relationship? What's the missing 20%? Yeah. It's always doable, always, in every aspect. And I think if I have one mission, it's to get people to stop settling. And the most prevalent question asked to me at the end of a coaching process, when I revisit those objectives and I look at all those 3 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10s, was, who was that person? And I love that, because that signifies to me that they are that person 2.0. They've completely and utterly shifted. And that's why I love this process. I was talking the other day to someone and saying, my job is exactly the opposite of a doctor. Like, everybody who walks into a doctor's room goes, oh, God, I'm feeling shit, and complain, yuck, awful, terrible. And every single person who walks into my life goes, I want more. I want to be more excited about life. I want to do more, feel more, be more. And so my job is exactly the opposite of a doctor, which I'm very pleased about.
So the other thing is, yes, okay, you can want more, and you can want to be more, and you see this opportunity, and it doesn't make it any less daunting. There's a sense of trepidation to actually make this thing happen. And the interesting thing about that is, why is there a sense of trepidation? Why is there this fear? What is it as a human or as a person? Some people have less. I think it's on a scale, right? Most things are on a scale. So a lot of people have a massive fear of asking for something, or just moving, or changing career, or doing whatever it is. And some people have far less. What is that? You say it's got a lot to do with the way that you were brought up.
Well, of course, it's about how we were brought up. But actually, as humans, we are hardwired that way. We are hardwired to go, I'm afraid, negative, or the fear is in us. And that's because that's how our brains operate. Our brains, for the first 2 years of our life, operate entirely on instinct. And that ability to, that instinctive fight, flight, freeze mode is in all of us. And we have to have it, because if we did not have that, we would walk across the street and get hit by a truck. We wouldn't have any cares in the world. We would do ridiculous stuff. But a conscious person becomes more aware of their thoughts and looks at the fear, looks at the thought, because fear is only a thought. It's nothing more than that. And says, I'm afraid of X, Y, Z. I'm afraid of, okay, so I've just moved countries, and people would say to me, but what if you don't like it? Natural instinct. And I would say, what if I do? So it's about observing the thought and consciously flipping it to the positive. So what if I'm not successful in this job? What if I am? What if I don't like my boss? What if I do? What if I don't make enough money? What if I do? And that's the journey into starting to create different thoughts in your mind. And this is so vital, because our brain does not know the difference between a thought and reality.
This is what I wanted to get into, because you've spoken a lot about this. Fear is a thought, right? So it is a thought because it's not actually a thing. A thing is something that's happening to you. It is actually happening to you. But everything else is just this sort of trepidation and an idea that you've conjured up yourself, given your frame of reference, given your history, given something that happened to your parents, maybe. You might have seen your father or mother change career and fail abysmally, and then suddenly you say, well, that's never happening to me, so I'm never gonna change, I'm never gonna do this, I'm never gonna take this role. And for us, we operate in this environment in the commercial real estate world where guys will come out of a more fixed salary type role, and they move into this very entrepreneurial role where you can make as much money as you want to, as long as you're building your network, as long as you're giving great client service, as long as you're marketing yourself, creating a presence for yourself, and just doing it with absolutely no limitation on what you think you can achieve, then you'll do very well here. However, you've got guys coming out of this industry where perhaps they earned a salary and they had to achieve certain things before the end of the day or the end of the month. And so we see this day in and day out. And the guys will say, and you'll sit in an interview and they'll say, I'm going to make so many calls. I'm going to build my network. I'm going to do all these things. And then they arrive and they lock down. And it's such a fascinating thing to watch, because some people just come here and they don't care. They just get going. They ask as many questions as possible. They consume information. They find opportunities. They build their network. They really give their clients unbelievable service. They have great conversations. They build lifelong memories and clients and relationships, etc., etc. And then you get other people who just can't do it, where they said they wanted to do it. And I believe that no one really sits there and says, I don't want to be successful. No one sits there and says, I don't want to build relationships. I don't want to extend my reach and my presence and all the rest of it. No one does that. But actually what happens is subconsciously they are telling themselves, I can't do that. Consciously, they might be saying, I'm going to do this, or this is my marketing piece to myself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do so well. And then they get there and they can't. What is that? What's happening there?
I think it's just we're hardwired to be fearful and to want the comfort zone and to want to feel content and settled. That's our wiring. Courage, the definition for me of courage is seeing the fear and doing it anyway. And understanding that the first time you do anything is the most scary. That's the worst it's ever going to be. And it's like the first time you get into a car to drive it. It's terrifying. And you're trying to balance, where are your hands and how do you change the gear and how do you put your foot on the clutch? And a year later, you just get into the car, turn the key, and off you go. And coaching is about creating those new mental habits and practicing until they just become the norm. And for me, one of the ahas for me when I was going through this process, which is ongoing, by the way, was that I went to do a retreat many years ago, 2015, almost 10 years ago now. And I went back 3 years later to assist on the same retreat.
do there is you're just trying to center back to what are you trying to achieve today? What are you trying to achieve in 5 years and 10 years? And who are you trying to be? So just centering back to that, because what I find interesting is that, as much as you decide this is what I'm going to do and be positive and move through things quickly, you can, in a series of a day, move in and out of that space, different things, challenging you. And it's about getting better at coming back to what you're trying to achieve, who you're trying to be, coming back to the present over and over again. So
that's the magic, actually. Because if there's a continuum, you are always right here in the present, always. Your body can't be in the past or the future. You're always here. And all guilt is about the past. It's I would have, I should have, I could have. And that's a useless emotion because there's nothing you can do about it. It's done. So part of this process is about letting go of your past and, if necessary, changing your story about the past, because we get stuck in the story of it. We're here in the present, and nearly all anxiety is about the future. And it nearly all starts with what if. And so if you become an observer of the what if question and you change that, and in fact, the person who taught me this was Nelson Mandela, because he had this astonishing ability to do exactly the opposite of what people expected. And if you go back and hear his stories, I was very privileged to be able to meet him and work with him and spend some time with him. And he just used to always kind of assess what people expected and do the opposite. Genius, absolute genius. And so if you take any relationship and you look at what's the pattern, because every relationship gets into a pattern, gets into a dance, and you want to change it, do one thing, work out what the pattern is, and flip it and do the opposite. And I've got countless case studies of how this works. When you become conscious of what the pattern is and do exactly the opposite.
And it's not, when you talk about relationship, it's not about a relationship as in you and your partner. It can also be a relationship with you and a colleague or your boss or whoever it might be. You might just get into this head-butting environment. And if you just do the complete opposite of what people are expecting, it sort of makes the other person do the complete opposite of what they've been doing as well, and it changes relationships. Yeah, I had this conversation actually the other day. It was quite interesting. What I've also realized is not only about people arriving and being conscious and really setting out to achieve the day that they wanted to achieve, achieve what they set out to achieve. They say, I'm going to speak to a lot of people today. I'm going to do these things. And then sometimes they just can slip back out of that. So about remaining present. But what I've also found is that having this level of authenticity when communicating, you can arrive at in a work environment. You can see the way that someone else is doing that and try and emulate it. Or alternatively, you can just be you and do that. And I find that as different as people are, if they're just who they are, that they have a far higher level of success in their career and in the work environment that they are now transitioning into. People are going to like them for who they are. Why be someone else so that people can like you for someone else, and you spend the whole time pretending to be someone, and eventually the whole thing's going to fall apart unless you become that person. But talk to me about authenticity as
my favorite topic in the world. Well, one of them. I've got many, but that's one of my favorites. So here's the question. Can you tell when somebody's being flaky and inauthentic?
I think you can, yeah.
Of course. Everyone says yes as an answer to that question, but everyone thinks that other people can't tell that they're being inauthentic and flaky. It's hilarious. Yeah. So we all can sense when somebody is not being authentic, and yet we all think that nobody can tell that we're being inauthentic. And one of the things I do is I coach all of the Miss South Africa girls every year, and it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of.
This is something you haven't brought up before. Just to note, please.
These are young, gorgeous, highly educated, very smart, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people. And one of the things I teach them is is authenticity, because they're so busy making assumptions about what the judges want to hear that they give the answer that they are guessing the judges want to hear instead of just being themselves. And in fact, I coached somebody who's in Durban at the moment, actually, who was going into a massive global search for an MBA at a very, very prestigious university. And they accept 10 people from all over the world. And she's very smart. But she was absolutely terrified. And I did some interview prep with her. And I just said to her, don't try and second guess what the panel is going to assess you on, because you have no idea. It would all be an assumption. Just be completely authentic and yourself. And in fact, she was one of the successful 10 candidates in the world, which is absolutely fantastic. I think that when you're authentic, there are going to be some people who don't like you. And that's the journey.
And that's
is to be okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
You don't like everybody. You don't like everybody. There's some people who just get right up your nose and you think, geez, I don't want to spend 1 second of my life with that person. And that's okay. Equally, there are people that you really don't like that somebody else does. And all of that is a matter of resonance. And again, I'm going to give you a Madiba story, because this is where I learned this. When I was the chief executive at Brand South Africa, we opened up a web page for Nelson Mandela's 85th birthday so that people all around the world could wish him happy birthday. And we were going to take those messages and turn them into a coffee table book for him, which we did. What the world didn't know was that I had hired 15 journalists to curate the messages, because we knew we were going to get tens of thousands a day, which we did. But for the first 3 days, we got hate mail until people realized that we weren't publishing it. But it taught me this very, very vital life lesson. And that is that somebody who I revered, he is one of, if not the best human being that I have ever met. And I've met just about anybody wants to meet. He is the best human that I ever met. And there were people who hated him, wanted him dead, were spewing the most disgusting, awful, racist, terrible stuff. But it taught me this lesson. It taught me that no matter who you are, you're on a continuum. And at this end, there are people who hate you. And at this end, there are people who adore you.
Such a good takeout, because that's exactly correct. Why don't you just be yourself, find your own words. It's exactly, we'll say to the guys, don't work off a script. Someone will come up with a script to try and, maybe they want to phone some clients or some landlords in their area to try and start building a relationship, and someone will come up with a script, and then they almost read this script. That's the definition of inauthentic, and that sounds the worst, especially you get these phone calls, these sales phone calls, and they're so scripted, that people will say, how are you doing today? And you'll say, I'm fine, thanks. And they say, I'm fine, thanks as well, and you think, oh, hang on, did I ask you if you're fine? Or it's so scripted, and I find that side of it just fascinating to watch. Do you find that you've got, younger guys, changing their careers, getting into career, testing things out, they're so malleable, they're open to experience and all the rest of it. And then towards the end of the spectrum, you've got guys who've been in a career for a long time or been doing something for a long time. They become so much, at least it's so much harder for them to change career as they've kind of progressed down this line. And so how do you deal with these two different sides? There's so much more fear here. Let's say you want to be this really successful deal maker in this industry. Okay. So now you say the difference is I want to be a really successful deal maker in this industry, or I am a really successful deal maker in this industry. Now, that person sitting there saying, I am a really successful deal maker in this industry, but they aren't. What is the message there in terms of what they're trying to land in their mind? Are they trying to embody the presence of this very successful deal maker? Or are they trying to pretend to be this very successful deal maker? Or what is this idea of setting the intentions and actually landing yourself firmly in that space?
I think it's about the consciousness of the words. So anything that comes after the words I am defines you. And what we now know from studying neuroscience is that the power of those words is about 5%. 95% of the power comes from the subconscious. So if you're consciously saying with 5%, I am successful, but your subconscious is going, no, you're not. Then your subconscious is going to win.
Yeah.
So, and that's where meditation comes in. That's where stilling the mind, that's where reprogramming your subconscious comes in until you totally and utterly believe it. So I've actually got a tattoo on my arm, which is my daily reminder for this. And the tattoo says, the creator of all that is always says yes. So I am successful, yes. So most of us, the internal dialogue is, oh, I'm an idiot. Oh, I just hit a really bad shot on the golf course. Or, oh, why did I do that? That's the internal dialogue. And the answer to all of those things is yes. You're a shit golfer. Yes. You're a bad person. Yes. But when you change that dialogue to I am amazing, I am talented, I am good at this, I am going to go and get that business. Yes, 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 yes. So for me, the being of the human being is much more important than the doing. We are human beings, not human doings. And I think that what meditation does is it brings you into your being and it allows you to become the creator of your destiny. It allows you to become the creator of your future, because the brain doesn't know the difference between a thought and reality. So if you start to create a new reality in your mind and you start to live into that reality. So my move to Mallorca, for example, came out of a meditation. I was studying, as I always do, almost every day. I was doing a course. It was during COVID. I was doing a soul visioning course, and it was a 30-day course. And on day 28, I had this really deep, profound meditation, which was about, like, why are you here? What's your purpose? What does your soul want? And I came out of that meditation and realized that my soul wanted adventure. My soul wanted to be near my son who lives in Mallorca, and my soul wanted not to just get old and to sink into old age, which is precariously close. I needed to go in search of an adventure that enabled me to look at my life and say, I lived my best life. I challenged myself. And that second, I made the decision. And from there, I just started saying to people, I'm moving to Mallorca. How I was going to do it, I wasn't sure.
I think that's a critical statement, actually telling people. You know, you might say, I'm going to do this and all the rest of it, but you actually have to tell people, because then you really are committing to doing it. Yeah.
I came out of that meditation and I sent a message to my son and I said, I've made the decision to come to Mallorca. I got this beautiful message back, which is far too rude for me to put into the public domain. But he was so excited that I was coming, and that set my intention. And it took me a good few years because I had to get certificates from Home Affairs and all of that stuff. But I eventually did it. And in fact, 5 weeks, my ticket was long booked. My cats were booked. My furniture was booked. 5 weeks before I left South Africa, I got an Irish passport, which meant that the visa was unnecessary. I could just arrive in Europe. And it gave me freedom. But it was complete intention. I was completely and utterly dedicated to that intention. And when people said to me, but you're 65, what if you don't make friends? What if I do? What if you don't like it? What if I do? I hadn't even looked at a photograph of Mallorca. I had no idea where I was coming. No idea. I knew that my sole purpose was to be near my son.
And you've loved it, and you've been there, and you've connected with so many people, and yeah.
Love it. Because I set out every day to love it. It's been the easiest transition that you can possibly imagine. Very intentional, very intentional.
I think that, again, looking at what I believe that sort of golden thread of people who are successful in our industry, and our industry is really about one of, taking your space, building a sphere of influence, building connectivity, understanding the market as a knowledge base. You move into that, trusted space. You have to work on a trusted basis with your clients, and you do. And really taking your space. What I've found some of the golden threads in the industry are those people who truly believe what's ahead of them. They know what's there. They know it's an unlimited space, which it is. And they really set out to build these deep and lasting relationships, and they do it every day consistently. They don't rock up on Monday and really get into it, after the weekend that they've sat and decided that this is what they're going to do on Monday. And then, it's like January when you can hardly get into the gym because everyone's carrying out their New Year's resolution. But then by the time winter rolls around, then you can do whatever you want, It's the same every single week or every single day. You might arrive at work and have the best intentions in the morning, and then by the afternoon, you've kind of forgotten it again. It's just about centering yourself back over and over again and achieving what you set out to actually do and taking your space.
And it's about showing up. And I think that, where I would like to reflect back on my experience with Galetti is I think that your guys have a realness and an authenticity that is an absolute pleasure to deal with. And it's a rare commodity in your business. It's a rare commodity in property to have people who will actually tell you the truth and who will be authentic with you. And that's why we've seen the growth and the success that we have in the last year, because I think that your guys really embraced doing this work and showing up fully. And I have to say it's because of you. You're an amazing leader and you show up. And so you give your people an amazing example of how to be. So it's my privilege and pleasure to work with all of you. Really,
Thank you. I appreciate those kind words. And it's been amazing working with you, and it's been such a great experience. And I think, like you said earlier, that sort of learning that, you're constantly learning. You're in a space where you're trying to understand more, trying to understand people better, trying to be better. Because as much as, and you alluded to this earlier, we haven't really got into it, but as much as you might set out with now, all of a sudden you say, I want to be this and I am this, you will only go as far as your mind limits you to allow yourself to go. Because if I say, I would like to be the best commercial real estate advisory business in South Africa, why did I say South Africa?
Yeah.
Why didn't I say the world? And it's that little limitation that will stop you from moving to another level. You might say, I would like to be the best in this business. Why just the business? And so it's these things and setting those intentions. So it's been fantastic working with you, and it's been great chatting to you today and just hearing some of the stories and running back. And I think everyone's really going to enjoy this episode. So
thank you so much, John.
Yvonne, it's been fantastic. Thanks so much for joining me. And appreciate everything you've done for us. And thanks for joining us today.